week, and I want to read it because I agree with it, frankly, and I know that the entire village board agrees with this statement. So, and that's that the Village of Waunakee wants to make it clear that the following statement, well, this relates to that statement, but does not impact our collective and unanimous support for a continued volunteer fire department. And I am along with the village board in appreciating and supporting the work that our firefighters do to care for our community and those who live here. So I want to start with a few definitions that are going to be important. Again, those of you at the table, you've been talking and using these words. Those who aren't as familiar, maybe this would be helpful. But the first one is operating agreement. There is a Waunakee Area Fire Protection Operating Agreement, which is essentially an intergovernmental agreement. It is an intergovernmental agreement per state statutes between the 4 communities that are participants in the district: so Waunakee, Westport, Springfield, and Vienna. Do I have that right? I think I got that right. The district itself was formed in 1933 with those same 4 communities. Now, there might be some service areas that have been adjusted over time. Not totally sure on that, but those were the 4 communities that were part of the original creation of the district. This agreement was last updated in July of 2012. So again, you might hear us, you'll hear us try to refer to this regularly as the operating agreement. You might hear me or Brian reference the intergovernmental agreement. Those are both the same thing. Throughout the slides, I'll be grabbing pieces of the documents to which I'm referring to. Here is a selection copied out from the operating agreement itself. I did provide copies of this at your table. I'll have copies of these slides and we can provide them electronically as well to anyone interested. I'll have these on the table at the exit if people want to take any copies on your way out. The fire district. Now, this is also per that operating agreement. Oh, thanks, Jared. That helps. This references the district, which is the department that consists of those 4 communities. So when you hear us refer to the fire district, it is that collaborative department. And it also references the land area in which it serves. The fire board, now over time I've heard references to fire commission, fire committee, the district, and fire board. Technically, the 5 representatives that make governing decisions for the fire district is called the fire board. Here's the language from the operating agreement that defines the board and identifies the board's makeup, which includes 2 representatives from the village board and then 3 representatives, 1 from each of the town boards. There is also a bylaws, constitution and bylaws that establishes what's called Waunakee Fire Department number 1. Now, essentially, that is the Association of Firefighters and command staff. A lot of times we've referred to that, and I think they also refer to that as the association. So you'll probably hear me reference the association. That is the fire department members, the firefighters and command staff. Okay. We'll be talking about a fire study. That was a study that the village undertook in 2024, completed by McMahon Associates. Our consultant was Robert Whitaker. You might hear me refer to Robert Whitaker. And I am also, there's copies at your desk. I know you guys have seen it before, but another copy, hard copy for you. And I will have a pile of those at the table as well for anyone who's here and wants to take a copy or copies with them for others. So that'll be made available. What I want to do now is kind of walk through the timeline of what brought us through the board's process of analysis to where we stand today. So as I said, this is several years worth of work. That's true. Going back to June of 2023, when the fire board did vote to support the hiring of a firm to complete the study. Now, what the board didn't do is agree to undertake a study on behalf of the board. But what they said yes to was essentially saying, thumbs up, village board, you're welcome to pursue a study at your own cost. And we'll sort of go along for the ride kind of thing. But that was the decision they made. That started work in drafting request for proposals. Now, the village drafted a request, and that was presented to the fire board in draft form on 9/25/23. We asked the fire board to give it a look and suggest any edits, which they did. In October, then, following that meeting, the village board met, accepted and incorporated all the edits that the fire board requested, and then the village proceeded with authorization to release the RFP and receive submittals. So a couple month process for receive of those submittals. We released the RFP, and then a couple months later, in February of 24, the village board selected a company called McMahon & Associates, and the study process begins. What I do want to know, so between February and August of 2024, that study process moved along. And what I want to share is that as laid out in the final report on page 3, the consultant engaged a number of parties as collaboratively and completely as possible to receive as much input to help them in devising their report and recommendations. So here is a snippet from the fire study where they talk about the groups and organizations that they included in that process for study, which includes folks involved at the fire department, the other 3 town representatives on the fire board, as well as the village representatives, village staff, and the village board. Then in August of 24, the village board received their first presentation of the final study report. There's a snapshot from the YouTube video where Robert Whitaker is presenting to the village board the results of the study and summarizing his and his firm's recommendations. There's a link there. I assume we'll be able to upload the PDF of this slide deck onto our YouTube channel, so those watching can click on that to go to this YouTube video and watch that presentation, which I would recommend for more context. After this meeting, the village board asked the consultant to come back a month later to give time for the results of this study to be shared with members of the fire department and the 3 towns, to give them an opportunity to ask questions, seek clarification, express concerns or what have you directly to the consultant, so the consultant could accept that as additional context and come back with additional discussion at the village board meeting a month later. I did want to share, this is a snippet from an email that I sent to the fire board members and the fire association on August 25th, following that first presentation that was given to the village board. And I want to share this because it demonstrates the village's interest in getting the additional feedback from those other individuals as a part of this process. Which brings us to that second meeting in September of 24, where the consultant was back and reviewed other things that he had learned and kind of finished his scope of work with the village. Again, there's the YouTube snippet there. And I would add that this meeting also included a more in-depth discussion with the village board, as opposed to the consultant giving a one-way presentation. Here's my report. This was more of an engaging discussion. So I would suggest that folks in the community who want as much context as possible to know how this conversation has happened, that this would be a good meeting to watch to see more deliberation between and amongst members of the village board. Okay. In October of 24, the fire board met. It was their first meeting after having received the results of the study. There was discussion about the study, but no action was taken at the fire board meeting. In December of 24, the fire board met again. They did vote to keep the current operating agreement in place while a new fire commission is created. That passed a 3-2 vote, with the 2 village board members voting no, because I believe, and they can add context later in the discussion, that there are important reasons to reopen the operating agreement as it related to creating a commission. Following that meeting, also in December of 24, the village board passed an ordinance that changed its current ordinance to require a fire commission, and them then being responsible for selection of a fire chief. About a month later, in January 20th, the association held an election and hired and elected a new command for the fire department. Shortly after that, about a week after that, the fire board meets, and the village representative to the board, speaking on behalf of the village board, read a statement related to the chief selection and status related to the fire commission creation or lack thereof. The day after, the village issued a statement with some FAQs. That statement and FAQs are also printed off at your table, and there'll be a copy at the back table for those as they depart if they want to get copies. So that's the time frame. A few notable items from the fire study that I'd call your attention to that are sort of germane to the sort of latest critical discussion as it relates to the fire commission. On page 8 of the study, I pulled a selection where I would say there weren't many statements where the consultants used words like immediately. This was one of them, and that's a recommendation that the fire district operating agreement be updated immediately to include a fire commission that appoints the fire chief and confirms the appointment of officers and subordinates of the fire chief to conform with state statutes. So that was a primary recommendation, if not probably the most insistent recommendation from our consultant. There is a sentence in there where he talks about that the department should also transition to a full-time chief after the agreement is updated. But I'll clarify that within the recommendations, that isn't as immediate a process as is the creation of a commission. So there is a differentiation between those two. All right, good. You've heard, well, let's see, is this where you jump in? Yep, this is where you've heard enough from me. I asked Brian to share some information about some of the specific actions the village took relating to its code, as well as what state statutes has to say about the creation of a fire commission, and sort of interrelate those to the actions that have occurred to date.
Sure, and it's relatively brief. I mean, if you go back, and you don't have to go back to the slide, but the slide from McMahon Associates made clear that the village should take action very quickly to come into compliance with Wisconsin statutes. And so that's what the village board, the village board, I think, thought, well, okay, if we're going to ask the other parties to amend the operating agreement to be consistent with state statutes, the first thing that we should do is make sure that our code is consistent with state statutes. And so in December, we modified the code to this language. And really what that does, and I don't know if you want to bounce to the second or the next item. So this is the statutes. And it's just obviously just a snippet, but it says each village with a population of 5,500 or more, obviously Waunakee has more than 5,500, we have an obligation to provide fire protection services. It says shall, it doesn't say may. Then it gives us a number of different ways in which we can provide fire services. We, along with the other 3 towns, have created a joint fire district to provide services within the village of Waunakee and the towns. Well, then, so we've essentially done 2A3 under the statutes. That bumps you down to 2B. Each village, I'm looking at 2B2, each village with a population of 5,500 or more that creates a joint fire department, which we have, must have a joint board of fire commissioners. And then elsewhere in the statute, it makes clear that once this fire commission is created, then it's going to have the powers under the statutes for fire commissions. Those powers are many, but one of them, and one of the most important things, is to hire the fire chief. And so I think that's kind of, if you go back to the slide that Todd had up from McMahon Associates, that's effectively what the village has been attempting to do over the last couple of months, is amend its code to be consistent with the statutes. And then I believe that Robert and Nyla have been trying to work with the fire district board to amend the operating agreement to be consistent with the statutes. And that hasn't happened yet. I'm not going to get into that other than to say when and if this happens, and it certainly should happen, we're not going to be reinventing the wheel with this. I mean, there are plenty of municipal codes out there that and agreements that have fire commissions, and there's probably even some boilerplate ordinances or agreement language that the parties will be able to utilize to get this done. So I think it can happen in a relatively quick time period. The other thing that I just wanted to comment on very briefly is, consistent with the action taken by the board over the last 2 years, as Todd pointed out. I saw some social media posts about the last fire district board meeting, and I just so everyone is clear, the Waunakee has members on the fire district board. I think we have members on EMS district board. We have a joint plan commission where we have plan commission members and from the village and also from the town of Westport. Just so everyone understands, whenever the Waunakee representatives act at these different meetings, they're always acting on behalf of the parent body. In the case of the Joint Plan Commission, they're acting by the parent body of the Waunakee Plan Commission. For the Fire District Board and the EMS District Board, they are acting based on the Village Board, whether there's a formal motion that's taken or not. But I feel very comfortable with the statement that was read at the Fire District Board meeting because it was consistent with everything that the Village of Waunakee Board has done over the last, whether years or months. And so I just wanted to state that, certainly willing to answer any questions if they come up, just so everyone understands what the role of the representatives of the village are on these different boards.
So this item is on your agenda as kind of a one-way presentation for us to lay out some of the background, certainly some of the facts, and trying to address some of the things that we've heard public question about, and I'm not blaming the public for maybe having some misinformation. I mean, this has been going on for several years. We deal with that every day. Sometimes it's hard to perceive what everyday person walking down the street knows or doesn't know about this. So we wanted to take this time to share that background context. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And then we are to hold discussion until later on today, but we are in public comment next on our agenda. And so thank you very much for the presentation. And do we have any public comments?
Yes, we have David Betcher of 916 Lexington Way.
All right, and Dave, if you press the button so that it's green.
Hi, my name is David Betcher. I'm a resident here in Waunakee, but I also happen to be the Waunakee representative on the Dane County Board. And as such, I wanted to make sure that I've expressed to you all that if at any time you want to meet or talk with me about, obviously there's a lot of interaction between the village and the county, I'd be happy to meet with you and talk with you about whatever's occurring. I got to admit, my first 9 months was right into the county budget, which is very astounding. That's $1 billion budget in Dane County. And it was obviously a tough budget, mainly because of the end of a lot of funding that was coming out of COVID. And one of the hardest things I had to deal with was the fact that the county can no longer support the Waunakee Food Pantry. Because all of that money was federal money that was funded through the federal government, came to the county to control it, but the county actually none of it was county tax money. And according to legal, the county cannot actually take county tax money and give it to a food pantry directly. Only through assisting seniors or some other specific cases, that's the only time county money can actually be used in that way. That was a tough decision, and it was very tough having so many comments from the public here in Waunakee who knew that that was happening, and they're saying, oh no, the county is cutting their money from the food pantry. And it's like, that's not really what's happening. We're just not getting that pass through anymore, and so we can't do it. And that's the hardest thing being an elected official. And for that, I want to thank you all for what you're doing about the fire department. It's not easy sitting in those chairs and having to say no, having to say we have to follow state law. We could do all sorts of things except violate state law. And that's where you're stuck. And that's the hardest time talking to constituents, is when you have to give them that type of an answer where they want to do something, but you literally can't. You turn into the bad guy, you turn into the problem, you turn into all of that, even though it was a state statute that says you couldn't do it. And I commend all of you for standing up and going through this process, doing this and taking that vote. It's easy, not easy, it's easier to work on AUDs or bees or chickens when you can have options and you can talk with the people and come to compromises. But when the state law says no, that answer's gone. And I really hope that as this goes forward, we can do a lot more contact and help people understand that that decision wasn't done out of malice, wasn't done because of who the fire chief is. And I'm a little surprised by some people. It's like, we have no idea where the fire chief will be. And I would expect no reason not to still have the same fire chief at the end of the process. And I'm hoping we can get beyond that hurdle of that assumption that somehow
3 minutes.
everything's going to change. One last comment is I really want to thank the board members who've come to the public meetings at the library between the school board, the village board, and myself to help the public. And a lot of people have encouraged me to keep doing those. I will, of course, invite any of you to come, as long as not more than 4 of you come at one time, more than 3 of you come at one time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And one of these days we'll have to have you back and do a formal presentation during business on everything that's happening. Thank you very much. And next up, Lynn.
I don't have any other public comment sheets.
All right. Was anybody in the audience would like to make a comment? All right. Seeing none, do we have anyone online that would like to make a comment?
If anyone's online wishes to make a comment, please click raise hand now and we will bring you in. I do see one person and there's no hand raised.
All right. So thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you, Dave, for speaking. And we will move on then to the consent agenda. Do we have anything we would like pulled from the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up is reports and announcements. And first announcement I'd like to make is Lynn's first time here running our meeting. Thank you, Lynn, for stepping up. Carla is at senior night for the hockey parents, which earlier I said is the only time most teenage boys will hug their moms in public. So I give them a flower. So it's a good night to be a senior mom this night. So first up then is police committee.
Not a whole lot to cover there. Basically, we did a review of the last quarter. Lots of good stuff going on, and construction has started on the remodel.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Library board.
Only thing that we discussed was we're going to spend about $17,000 to get a new website for the library that's more integrated. So event booking can be done right in the website, no phone calls, anything like that.
Oh, wow. That'll be nice. Utilities Commission met and we reviewed our investments with our investment advisor. We reviewed some bids for the substation and received an update on the well and well number 6 and the tower construction. So it was a very productive meeting. Parks and Rec Committee.
Yeah, so we discussed a variety of things. Obviously, some of us were talking before the meeting. We heard from former trustee Hersberg about the construction of a possible labyrinth in the village. We reviewed the park plans in the Heritage Hills subdivision, approved those, as well as some names for some of Don Tierney's new parks.
Excellent. And I skipped over Fire District. Fire District.
We're going to discuss it later in the meeting, but obviously we made an announcement at that meeting and we had some discussions about what the commission would look like.
All right. Other committees, boards, or commissions? Other announcements? Todd?
One I'll just note related to work out of your 2025 budget in collaboration with other organizations, one being the Waunakee Neighborhood Connection, the other being Create Waunakee, Inc. Within the past 2 weeks or so, both have successfully hired new staff members that are going to certainly intertwine with a lot of our work. One directly is at the Waunakee Neighborhood Connection, which is our bilingual community specialist, which will be working with the village 2 days a week. The other 3 days will be working for the Waunakee Neighborhood Connection. And then the Create Waunakee, Inc. has hired a development director. That person's coming from out of state. I think they had a really successful, broad recruitment process. And there'll be an opportunity to introduce both of those new hires to you, I'm sure, very soon.
Oh, that's exciting. Thank you. Any other announcements? All right, seeing none, let's move on to our first item of business, and it'll be a public hearing and discussion action on a certified survey map for the Goddard School at 1117 Stephenson Lane, lots 22 and 23, Arboretum Office Park. And I believe, Lauren, you'll be presenting this?
Yep, so this is pretty straightforward, basically a lot line adjustment to combine 2 lots in Arboretum Office Park for the purpose of building a daycare. It went through tech staff fine, no one had any concerns. We're currently working through utility easement releases, which the one for the village was on the consent agenda tonight. But other than that, it's just trying to combine those 2 lots so they can get to construction here within the next couple weeks.
All right. Thank you. And do we have anyone that in the audience that's representing that would like to present? No? All right. Would you like to say something before? Okay. All right. So let's open the public hearing at 6:28 PM. Do we have anybody who would like to speak on the public hearing on the combining of lots 22 and 23 at 1117 Stephenson Lane? Do we have anyone online that would like to comment? No one's raising their hand.
Again, same note for raised hand. No hand.
All right. Seeing no comments, we'll close the public hearing at 6:29 PM. All right, so let's go down the row. Any thoughts on this or questions on this? Robert, can I start with you?
Sure. So is there, this is for staff, is there any, I know last time that we had kind of a institutional user in the business park, it was, we had to rezone, I think, for, it was the church that went in back there. Is this something similar to that with this, since it's a school, or is this more of a daycare?
No, it's a daycare, which is allowed within Arboretum Office Park.
Okay, well, yeah, my daughter went to the daycare that's in the Arboretum Park too, so that's why I just wanted to make sure that,
Yep.
Okay,
Yep, it's an allowable use.
all right, that was my only question.
All right, Joe.
Leaving the scope just to the CSM, I think it's straightforward and easy.
All right, Aaron.
Yeah, no comments on the CSM.
All right, Sam.
Nothing other than I thank you for choosing the village to open a facility since childcare is a great need in the community.
All right, we'll keep going down the row.
Yeah, I have
No?
no comments.
No comment? All right, none for me either. So on page 30 of your packet is where you'd find the motion,
Yep.
and do we have a motion?
I'll motion to approve the certified survey map for Goddard School combining lots 22 and 23 in Arboretum Office Park with village signatures withheld pending notification that other public utilities have abandoned their rights.
Second.
All right, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item carries. All right, thank you. Look forward to seeing you guys break ground. Yeah. Item number 1, discuss and take action on the Waunakee Area Fire Department Intergovernmental Agreement, including but not related to the discussion and action on the legal requirements related to the creation and operation of the Statutory Fire Commission. So we just saw the presentation on that, and now is the time set aside for our discussion. Before we go into discussion, do you guys have anything you'd like to add, Brian or Todd? No? All right. So with that, what comments do we have? And maybe start with our fire committee members first. Would that be all right? All right. And sure, Nyla.
Okay, first of all, I would like to say that there's no way that we have ever questioned this service or performance the fire department has provided. It's always been quality, and we appreciate that. Many times, it's like David Betcher said, what we want to do and what we need to do are two different things. And I know at this point that we need to move ahead and form a fire commission to be in compliance with state code and and we need to do this not only to be in state code, but also for the people and the businesses of Waunakee. So that's where I'm at.
All right, thank you, Nyla. Robert?
So I actually prepared a little bit of a visual for this to help explain where we're coming from. So I'll share it to the Zoom really quick here. You can thank Microsoft for that. I didn't actually come up with that. So I wanted to put this up as a visual just to help understand people in the public who maybe are learning about this for the first time, where we're coming from and where we're at, as representatives to the fire board. So Nyla and I go to the meetings, and we represent the village, and we represent the wants and the desires of the village when we go. And when we go there, what people in the public probably don't really know is that Waunakee pays and has the allocation of 71% that's based off of the equalized value of the village. When this agreement was, when these agreements were contemplated, this chart did not look like this. I'm sure it looked much more even. The village was much smaller than it was, and they came together and most likely said, you know what, it's better if we combine all this because a fire district can be expensive, and that's the reality. So at the time, I'm sure they agreed, Waunakee was bigger then, but having 2 votes was probably appropriate. What has happened over time is that as Waunakee has grown, it has taken a much more larger portion of the allocation. And as a part of that, that means that the voting power never really changed. I tried to go back and look at earlier agreements. I couldn't see that they ever really addressed that in the agreements. And I know that with other agreements that we have, such as the EMS, that agreement hadn't been touched since it was drafted in the 70s. And that one, we only have 1 vote on, and we still pay probably about 70% of that one as well. So the village has kind of the best way I could say to think about this, if you're seeing this for the first time, is this isn't something that the village has not been aware of. The village has been growing larger, and it realized that it's just it's become a much harder, larger part of this. And these districts, you can easily say by looking at this, would not exist if the village did not participate in it, because we pay so much of it. And so we have effectively become, like the largest user, and we've become the largest funder. So I kind of put together some real quick talking points, and again, this isn't committing the village board to anything. This is just to talk about what we've been talking about, because I think one of the things, and what has been probably the most frustrating as a representative on this, is that we've had conversations, but we couldn't talk about them publicly. Now we finally have it noticed, so we can talk about it publicly, and we can show the public that we actually have a plan. I think one of the top things is, why would you guys do this if you didn't have a plan? Well, we did, but we couldn't exactly talk about it because that's how government works, right? So really quickly, why now? Like I said, we've outgrown our existing agreement. And it's indicated right in the report, if the district terminated, they're confident the village have assets to provide fire protection services. This is in the McMahon report. That I'm not saying anything that's new or frightening with this. And the reality is that the towns that are in the agreement, when Nyla and I have attempted to work with them, they've gone, their comments in the press, their comments in the meetings are, they want to slow it down. They want to continue to slow it down. It's leading to real uncertainty with district issues. The issue that we're in right now, is the result of, and I'll bring it up, Trustee Fry and President Runge went to a meeting where they were passing the budget, and there was an agreement that they would start working on the operating agreement the month after that. Well, what happened? That meeting got canceled because the chair, I believe, was unavailable, and then we met in December, and they made a motion to say, no, we don't really want to work on the agreement. So we know that we're, as working as a municipality, that our fellow municipalities that are in this are not really, they're not saying the right things, they're not really taking steps, and it's really creating uncertainty, because now we've had to make a statement that was deeply unpopular, but it was in accordance with the law. Something that's important to note, we can always offer fire protection services on a contract basis to the towns. So that is a choice. I'm not committing us to anything, but for anybody who says, well, if the village were to do anything, what happens to Westport, what happens to Springfield, what happens to Vienna? they can get services, and they can get them at rates that are pretty similar to what they're paying now. It's not as if we're going to seek to financially punish anybody. That would not be to anybody's benefit. We want to be good neighbors. So to help people understand really where Niall and I are coming from for the frustrations with trying to get change over there, a really quick timeline for how this works is that you have to present all changes. This is all based off of our agreement, the 2012 agreement. So everything I'm going to say in here follows exactly how the law is written, how the agreement is stated. So we have to present all of our changes to the fire board, and then it has to be approved by each municipality per the agreement. So I made a quick example because it's not really an example. It's what we're attempting to do right now. So let's say we want to contract for an attorney in February. And you have to remember, it wasn't budgeted in 2020 for the 2025 budget that we would have this attorney. So we have to meet at our first meeting in February, and which is the fourth Monday, and we introduce it, we debate it, and we pass a motion to say that we're going to contract an attorney. Let's just say everything goes great. Then in March, comes back to our individual municipalities. We have to bring it up, and then Niall and I have to ask for approval from this board because it was an unbudgeted item that we could go back and say the village, yep, the villages agree with it. We're going to make this really clean. We're going to say everybody agrees, all 4 municipalities, fine. So then we meet back again in March, which again is the end of March because we meet on the fourth Monday. We all report back that it's approved, and then hiring take place, and then we vote that we're going to contract it out with the to an attorney. So you can see something that could if you had a department at just a village level, this is an item that could take place in one meeting that could immediately have action taken upon it. In the current agreement, we have to go through a lot of hoops just to even contract out for a service such as hiring an attorney. And it's important to have this nuance because there is no desire to move forward with the commission without having an attorney hired. So even the simple act of getting this attorney contracted is going to take 2 months. So another major question I've seen is what is the relationship between the fire district board and the firefighters? And this was kind of hinted at when we talked about in the agreement. While the fire membership it says in the operating agreement that they are a party to as the department, there is actually no mention of the firefighters anywhere in here except for one statement that states that they are independent. I'm hopping ahead. That last bullet point on there, that we have a contractual agreement. There is no employer-employee relationship. If you remember from the McMahon report, it says that that's not something that we should do. We should look at having that as an employer-employee relationship. So the board only can provide oversight to the district, not the firefighters. So for every member of the public who comes up to trustee fire myself and says, I have an issue with something a firefighter did, our recourse is nil. We can go back and we can ask, Battalion Chief Adler as our sole employee to say, can you look into this? And that's about the extent of what our agreement contemplates. As you see on there, that underlined line, we're limited to employee oversight of only their one employee, which is the fire inspector. This is explicitly in the agreement. So we have no oversight of anybody in the membership. We just have it over the fire inspector. And in fact, I would argue even it's in his capacity as fire inspector, not as a battalion chief. Something that's also important to note on here, district owns all assets. So this is also explicitly in the agreement. Everything that's purchased, real property, everything, it's the district. So the firefighters and the membership do not own it. And if somebody donates something to the district, it's owned by the district. It's not owned by the firefighter membership. So it's an important distinction that we as the board are providing the material resources that they all need to go out and fight fires, but we are technically the owners and we own 71% of all of it. So, that's the really basics, but again, I can't stress enough that we don't have in our current agreement any sort of relationship with the firefighters that we'd be able to dictate any personnel actions.
Okay, Robert, as you continue, just one clarification. I've heard you use "we" a couple of times, but
Sorry.
"we" is different. So
Yes, we as the fire board.
right. Yep. Okay.
I
I just want to
apologize
make
for
sure
that.
that add that into the ongoing slides. I think that'll help.
Okay. So one of our routes choices here is we have our own fire department. Now, this is a radical idea. This is not something that you have in front of you that we've introduced. So this is not intended to do anything, but it's to say, should we have our own fire department? What would really change? What would be different? Because that's a big concern for a lot of people. One suggestion would be that we could immediately have the commission and committee issue taken care of because we already have what a lot of other places do is they combine, I'm going to get yelled at by Brian for even talking about this, but they combine like their fire and police commissions together sometimes as public safety.
So almost, I mean, basically what you would have so let's say a city that has its own fire department and police department, you will have a police and fire commission that will govern both under state statutes. Now, you also have then what a lot of communities call a public safety committee.
That's
So,
the second bullet point on there.
yeah, so in other words, you'd have the police and fire commission that would have the statutory authority. The public safety committee would be more like any other subcommittees that you have generated at the village, like right now. The police, I think it's called the police committee, and that's where sometimes you can get a little bit of confusion because you have a committee that's called the police committee, but which is not a statutory police and fire commission.
Right. So the desire would still that we would have some sort of oversight, so we'd be able to have a committee and then the commission would take care of it. You know, that last bullet point, regardless of outcome compliance with state law, that means regardless if we form our own fire department or if we don't form our own and there's still a commission at the board level, we're going to get in compliance. So I'm putting out there as we came to an agreement, there are table stakes here that there will, you know, the way a chief is selected has to be through a commission process. So we're in agreement on that. You know, another thing that would be different, kind of alluded to earlier, we could take swifter actions on the benefit of the fire department. You know, since we have an existing commission, we don't need to go out and get new commissioners for that. They would have access to village resources, audit maintenance, you know, legal support, things like that. You know, that would actually lower the costs of operation for the department because now they would actually have access to the buying power of the village as opposed to the board, which has very little buying power on its own because it's a separate entity that lives in its own world. And finally, we can, for those that are worried about taxes and increase in taxes, we would actually have more control over that because we'd be able to better anticipate it. It would go right into our capital project needs because fire trucks are expensive, equipment is expensive, and it would give us ability to roll that in for our understanding of what we'd be paying for. So again, this is very high level. This is not as simple as just a slide on here. This would require a lot of work. Some people ask, you know, what's the benefit to the community if the village took this? So I put this on here because I think this drives home the point that we have all been stating about the volunteer firefighters and how we, you know, how we appreciate the work that's being done, how we desire to continue to have them there. We can ensure that there is a legacy that's made a permanent part of the department. The village can set aside money. We can look at ways that we would work with the membership to make sure that they are honored properly, that, you know, that they're honored correctly, you know, in the community. As the village gets larger, they're not forgotten. There's not something that, you know, I know there's a lot of concerns about what happened at EMS and things like that. I'm not looking to have like a friends group have to come in and honor the volunteers. I'd want it to actually be a part of the district because it does not exist if not for the fact that years of volunteers putting their blood, sweat, and tears into, you know, fighting fires and to making sure that everybody's safe. It would give more clarity to current and future firefighters. We would have job descriptions because that's just a standard of a village department that we have those. We would be able to finally get a community risk assessment. We'd have strategic planning. If you look at a lot of fire departments out there or any emergency services, they go around there, it's like, these are our mission, this is our vision, these are our values. Like you can look that up immediately. That's what McMahon was talking about in the report. Faster response times on the need of the department. Again, is just sense a theme here. When you work with the fire board of, you know, multi-municipality, it takes a long time to get anything done. This would allow for faster responses to their needs. Facilities improvements. You know, we own the building. In case anybody in the community did not know that, the village actually owns the fire hall. So if we wanted to do improvements on it, we would be able to do them really quickly. And in fact, I'm going to suggest later that maybe we should consider that even before that. Greater access to training to firefighters. Again, part of the McMahon recommendations is getting firefighters access to any training that would be relevant to them and necessary to them. We want a well-trained force of firefighters. This would help for that. Again, all of this is in the service of maintaining volunteer service as long as possible. Nobody here wants to not do that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So faster response times on the needs of the department means that we as a contributing body, if this was a department of the village, we'd respond faster to their needs. So they need something, it can happen pretty quickly versus having to go through all 3 municipalities.
Yeah, we meet twice a month and we can take actions, you know, even in a consent agenda item that the board over there could not if it wasn't pre-budgeted.
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah.
So what are the next steps? Now here's where it gets scary. These this is the scary part of when we talk about this. So we have options that are available to us. One option is we can give notice of withdrawal to the fire district. So this is an 18-month minimum process for anybody who isn't aware. So even if we woke up tomorrow and we all said we don't want to be a part of it, that's not how it works. You have 2 years. And in fact, the way it's written, you can't withdraw. It's 18 months and it has to be whenever the end of the fiscal year is. So they work on a calendar year over there. So the earliest that we would be talking about is the end of 2026 if we, and there is no resolution tonight. I want to make it very clear to anybody watching, but that's what the timeline would be. Obviously, we can continue to negotiate with other municipalities in the IGA. You know, if they know that we are serious about this, that this is what we want to offer, that we can do this, they may decide that it's in their best interest to renegotiate the IGA to dissolve it and allow the village to create a department on a reasonable timeline for us. And then they would get contracted out services, and then they would be free from ever having to come to another fire board meeting again. And it would be fair to them because we would base it off of the current. We would attempt to base it off of the current funding formula as it is now. One thing that I would suggest, and I hope that we can discuss in the near future, is that we just go ahead and we make the upgrades to the firehouse now. That's McMahon's recommendation 24. That was about putting the ventilation systems in to connect it directly to the fire trucks. I don't want to delay that any further than needed. And I think that that's something that we can do now. I think that there is maybe federal government funds, not sure lately, but yeah. But I mean, there are things that we can do that would defer the cost for that as far as taxpayers are concerned. So also that we can direct we can direct staff, attorney, third-party experts on technical details. I want to make this incredibly clear for anybody that's watching. This is not a simple process. This isn't, we can't just come up with a resolution in 2 weeks and drop it down and say, there, everything's solved. In fact, any resolution that's written is going to say, we need to engage with an expert and we need to have this, written out and we need to have the considerations put in place. I know that we have McMahon that we can go back to. I'm sure staff will have opinions on it as well, but it's steps that we can take as a board to keep the process going. But again, to stress, no part of this says that we're going to stop attempting to work on the IGA and work with the other municipalities. So even if we come back in 2 weeks and we say, we have a resolution in front of us that says that we're going to announce that we're going to withdraw, we're going to make it clear to them, like, we want to keep working with you. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to, as the report said, ideally, we would not dissolve it, but something has to change. And we know that something has to change because otherwise we wouldn't have the conflict that we have today on this. And I don't have this anywhere on the slide, but I can say, from everybody I've spoken to about this, this is an issue that the village has been working on that predates me, predates Nyla. I think it predates anybody on this board, some of the people that attempted to engage in this over the years, because I know one of the comments is, well, you've been over 5,500 for a while. I was in a commission. I think there were some well-meaning individuals that did attempt to make progress on this that did not find any progress on it whatsoever. So we are not the first. And I will say publicly, if any of those individuals that were involved are listening, we appreciate the work that you did in getting us to this point, because it wouldn't have been possible if you didn't start the conversation years ago. With that, I will stop sharing and I will stop talking.
All right, thank you, Robert. Joe, you're on the police committee as well, and so you talked about these sorts of things for years, first responder things. Can we turn to you for comment next or questions?
You can. I guess I'd want to start by thanking all of the presentations that have been made tonight. There was a lot of information in there. I think everything accurate. I didn't find any concern with any of it. But I think the bottom line here is the state law is that we need to move to the commission. And all of the rest of that is pieces as to how we get there and how it all fits together and how it's all going to function. And we'll figure those things out. So that's really about it.
Thank you, Joe. Tricia.
Yeah, I agree with Joe on the presentation discussions. And I think, just in my time on the board, this is one of the areas that I have learned the most about in the intricacies of it, but also the emotions attached to it on all sides and how difficult that is. And what I think, Todd, you made the comment, you don't know what a normal citizen knows and what they're aware of versus what they assume and what they believe. And I would say before I came on the board, I didn't understand the the nature of, the multiple entity, intergovernmental organization agreement, how that operated. And I would just assume that, Waunakee's a growing community. It's of a size and nature where we're going to have a fire department. It's going to take care of our citizens, but it feels like it's at the point where it's getting like this, kind of the relationship strain is, I think, causing its own risk. And I agree. I think first and foremost, we have to become compliant with state statutes, especially, since we're aware of it and it has been called out. It would be irresponsible for us not to do so. I think next steps, I hope, maybe having some more hopefully proactive discussions with some of the other communities can come up with a good plan to help kind of, what is that next, what does our next iteration look like? How do we move forward and still provide the services for our citizens?
Thank you, Tricia. Erin.
Yeah, I guess to start, I just want to reiterate, like, personally, and I know the board, like, we are so thankful for, it's an honor that we have a volunteer fire department that is so integral to like the fabric of our community. And like, it's amazing to know what these men and women sacrifice to help people they don't know and help our community. And for so long, like, so much good has come from that. And it's not our goal to stop that in any way. Our community needs this. It's also, as a municipal body, this is one of our most basic and core functions, is providing safety and ensuring that people are supported and that there's these protections in place, that if something happens, this is who they go to. And so this, for me, there's a lot of, looking forward and next steps and what to do. But, the past few weeks, this importance of the commission and following what we, passed in December, I think is, one step, just ensuring that our citizens are, we're all, we're following state statute for our citizens, same way that, question on the process of the fire district board having to get approval for any unbudgeted expenditures. Is that after a certain amount, or it's just anything?
Anything the way that the agreement is written.
And is that just a majority vote, or does it need to be unanimous?
It's silent on that, but I believe it would be a majority vote.
Okay. So there's no way we can just make the fire district spend money because we don't have those votes. It's a good, because there's maybe people that, aren't aware of that. And all right, I think that's my only question right now.
Thank you, Erin. Sam.
Again, I just want to reiterate, along with the rest of us, my continued support of a volunteer fire department and the individuals like Bert and Josh who are here. Thank you both for being here and what you do. None of us on this board have said we want that to go away. Nobody has said that at all. And we have an obligation to comply with state statutes when we're knowingly in violation. I've made that very clear in public and in private. We don't have any options here. We have to do something.
Thank you, Sam. I want to paraphrase you a bit, Robert, but for the volunteers, we wouldn't have the safety that we have as a community. And I want to acknowledge too that it's 1933, 92 years of volunteer fire service. That's generations of Waunakeeans who have shown up to help out their neighbors when they need the help the most, and probably for most of them, what is one of the worst days of their lives.
And that's when the district was created. The volunteer firefighting in the community, I believe, dates back to the late 1800s.
1895, sir.
Oh, wow, really? Wow. 130 years. I've underestimated it by a few years then. So even more impressive to an already impressive legacy. So I think we're all in agreement that we want to make sure that we honor and cherish and preserve and support that legacy going forward, because really what a treasure it is for us to have. I think we're all in agreement as the fire board is in agreement about a commission is needed. And how that looks, Joe, I think that wise words and how we get there is really kind of the questions that we have now. Robert and Nyla, thank you for your service. And Robert, that was a great presentation tonight. Certainly, if you've not followed this closely, and a lot of us in the village, or a lot of our village residents are just hearing about it over the last few weeks, probably learned a lot about the history through both your presentation and what was said tonight. So with that, I do have a question for you, Brian. A little bit about an employer and employee relationship that was referred to in the McMahon Associates, and we know a little bit about what oversight looks like from that perspective. But is there an advantage to the fire district or the Firefighters Association if that employer-employee relationship is formalized? Are there things that we would able to be offering them, or,
Well,
you know?
I don't, I think, I mean, this is really a question, and I guess I would go back to something that Robert said. The fire district, I can't stress this enough, needs an attorney.
Yeah.
It can't be me, and
Mhm.
it can't be any of the town's attorneys, because we would have conflicts. But it really needs some guidance on how to move forward. And in particular, on the creation of a police and fire commission, or in this case, a fire commission. I mean, that then attorney would be able to comment on, because how this would play out, so I'm going to talk about not Waunakee.
Mhm. Yeah.
Hypothetical circumstance. You definitely have cities and villages in Wisconsin that, first we'll talk, that are in joint fire districts. And let's say you have 4 municipalities that are part of it. And then and essentially what the fire district board does is it handles the money based on what has been provided by the municipalities. And then you have a fire commission that is completely separate from that board by statute that then handles personnel matters. And, most notably that we've been talking about is a fire chief. There may not be many, if any, other employees of the actual joint fire district, though, because most of those joint fire districts will contract with volunteer firefighters. And so at no point in time are the volunteer firefighters employees of the district. It's a contractual relationship. Many smaller cities and villages that have their own fire department essentially do the same thing. In other words, they may have a few internal city or village employees, and then they probably have a contract with, adjacent municipalities to provide services, and then they will also contract with volunteer firefighters. So in that situation, you also don't have necessarily the employer-employee relationship. It's contractual. I think it's mainly the larger cities that are utilizing essentially everybody who's in the department is their own employee. And that's where you have the strict employee-employer relationship like the village has with all of its different departments right now. So I'm not sure if you're, with the size of Waunakee, and I know, and Robert made a presentation. I know that Robert made very clear no decisions have been made. You were just kind of giving an overview to let the public know, there are things that have been thought about. Wherever the village goes on this, my belief is that there's, obviously there's going to have to be a volunteer fire department. I can't imagine a scenario where there are all employees. And so I don't necessarily think that you're going to end up in an employee-employer relationship with the vast majority of the people. But again, that would be more of a question, for if there's a fire district, for that attorney. And if it happens to be, if the village of Waunakee ever has its own fire department, probably for your personnel attorney, who I am not.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. That ends my questions. And Todd.
I have a question, Brian, for you as well. And I guess that relates to the concern about swiftness and decision-making at the fire board level, and whether I wonder if there's anything we can do to sort of put a couple circuits together. Could our board here, the village board, give some sort of parameters for our representatives on the fire board to make spending decisions without the need to come back to the village board to get some sort of authorization. Maybe it's a blanket, you know, we hereby authorize Robert and Nyla to approve and authorize 50,000 in expenditures related to fire. Is that an action this board can take to create swiftness at the fire board level?
I don't know that that would be helpful unless the other municipalities' representatives were given the same authority.
I agree with that. This would almost be a symbolic message of how we can get on board with making swift decisions to the benefit of the department overall. I guess I agree with you, Nyla, that it wouldn't help if there's a month to wait for every other body.
I think it may be something that the board can do. I think we'd have to look into it a little bit further. I'd certainly want to talk to Renee about how we handle budgeting issues and things of that nature, and I don't want to put her on the spot right now, so you possibly, yeah.
That might, let's look, should we look into that? That feels like something that we should look into. At least.
I mean,
In
we theoretically have to have another conversation in 2 weeks anyway, because there is a proposed commission that we're not discussing tonight. Not more because it wasn't distributed to the rest of the trustees, but from the meeting that we had, there was a suggestion. So I would assume it would be appropriate for us to discuss that in 2 weeks as an enhancement.
Yeah.
Sure, I mean.
If we could look into that, that would be great. Yeah. Perhaps others will be inspired to do the same. We can get some decisions quickly. Other questions or comments? None? All right. Thank you all for all of the work on this. Bert, Josh, thank you for being here tonight. I understand we may have some viewers across the street. So thank you all for your service, for showing up for the community. Cannot tell you how much we all appreciate it. It means a great deal. It means a great deal. Thank you very much. Yeah. All right. With that, then on to the next item on the agenda, which would be discuss and take action on resolution rejecting the 2025 sidewalk improvement bid. And this is page 34 of your packet.
Yes, as you can see on the cover page, we opened bids on the 24th of January, and our sidewalk maintenance project bid actually came way over budget. So we're needing the board to reject that bid so that we can rescope the project and hopefully get bids that are more favorable to our budget.
All right. Thank you. Did anyone have any questions on that? No.
I'll move to.
Oh, you have a question,
sorry.
Joe? Go ahead.
I'm curious, because of the nature of the environment that we're currently in, is it possible that even if you rescope and go back, that we may still be way over budget?
Well, in essence, what we're gonna have to do is take the territory of, we were looking at making maintenance repairs on sidewalks and shrink it down.
Is it, you probably don't have real good information, but is the reason that the bid came in so high potentially related to materials?
No, we kind of felt it was more about the size of the project.
Okay.
We may have taken on a little more, and we were trying to complete the northern half of the village this year, because the original plan had us going through the whole village in like a 5-year increment. Well, now the size of the village, we've had to divide that up even more. And so we're having to reshape our timeline on how we're getting to various parts of the village.
Okay. From a financial standpoint, going forward in future budgeting years, should we be looking at potentially changing this sort of line item?
Yeah, we
Increasing?
internally have talked, on maybe upping or doing something different with the way we fund that.
Okay.
What we put aside for that.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll dig into it
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of
from now.
our road projects, and we're trying to take care of roads as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right, Aaron.
I'll move to reject the bid and approve the attached resolution.
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And final item under business today, discuss and take action on purchase of property located at 105 East 2nd Street. And we'll present this first, and then I'll read the statement if we decide to go into closed session.
Yeah, Lauren's going to be giving the brief presentation, but I don't have information to present related to the potential purchase of the property that would necessitate closed session tonight. There's nothing new to share. What we wanted to do is kick off that discussion about what would we do if we purchase the property, that help you debate that point and help advise staff on other research we should be doing for you.
All right,
So with that, I'll turn it over to Lauren.
off to you, Lauren.
Yeah. So we came up with a number of possibilities, and it's kind of a choose your own adventure. You can do one or multiple of them. The first one being the village could use the opportunity to clean up the easements and boundaries of the property. There's a small section of the building that overhangs the property line. We also have some easements running through there for access that we would be able to clean up just by having possession of the property. Having talked to the property owner, she would rather sell the property as a whole than do that kind of work beforehand. So to do that, we would need to acquire the property. We have a concept sketch, which is attached to your packet, of what it would look like if the village were to turn the area around the old mill building into a kind of a public meeting space. And actually, I will share. Let me pull it up here really quick.
As she gets this, I'll just give it a little context. This is a sketch that goes way back. We had our consultant at the time in planning and landscape architecture do a concept sketch that we shared with the owners of the property when we created or modified our downtown TIF district to suggest and put out their potential ideas and concepts that they may have interest in doing on their own property, perhaps with village support. So the paper hasn't yellowed yet because it's electronic, but it's pretty close. Yeah, but this goes back to 2011.
There we go. So the biggest change to the property would be taking down that back building that I guess at one point was possibly stables. And sorry, my voice is squeaking, so if you can't hear me, I apologize. And then kind of turning it into a pavilion space with a pergola and some landscaping. And it is something that would flow really nicely with the depot building, which the village also owns, and kind of coincide with public events there like the Wednesday Farmers Market. And then getting back to my page. We've also discussed using it for nonprofit offices or other public uses. Examples would be a space for Create Waunakee to have an office, or possibly some gallery space, or a future historical society. If you want to have a historical society, it's nice to have it in a historic building.
I'll just throw my 2 cents in that idea for a historic society for the village is really intriguing to me. I know when I started 14 years ago, there were some questions about that. We gathered people up to talk about how could we work to preserve history. The library had no space in the old building, although if people's relatives might pass and they had old things from Waunakee, they would go to the library first as a de facto place to consider. We ended up turning them away because we had no space. So I know there's interest. The issue was always the location. And that's a really intriguing potential use.
Another option would be to clean up the easements and boundaries for the property and then issue an RFP for potential uses. Could look something like what's on the screen right now, or it could be something completely different. But that would be discussions to be had with a hired consultant and village board and plan commission. And the last one would kind of be the status quo, would be being a commercial landlord until we have a better understanding of what the future use of the building would be.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. All right, what questions or comments do we have? Sam?
Well, I mean, obviously, this is a property that is, very near and dear to a lot of people in the community. My concern still remains somewhat that we are doing a comp plan right now. This property is not going to sell overnight. You've got you actually have a home in addition to other businesses on that block. From a planning perspective, we want that to be cohesive and look nice. Obviously, if we were to acquire the building, our firefighters in the room would certainly say that building is a tinderbox. It's the worst one left probably in the village. That's going to require a very expensive fire suppression system, regardless of who the tenant is.
Thanks, Sam. Aaron?
You come back to me, I'm looking something.
All right, sure. Trisha?
No, Lauren, thank you for providing these, and I think this is good information, even just for the public to have, as this has been on the agenda for a couple of meetings now, just to be clear that we're not looking at, if this were something the village decided to move forward with, not, taking it down, but instead, looking at higher and better uses and activating the space for more public, a public purpose of sorts, whether it's commercial or not. But no, I think this is good. Thanks, Lauren.
Joe?
Nothing in particular, but I will definitely agree with some of the things that Sam said. The need to add some sort of fire suppression system is definitely going to be a very expensive part to this. So just one more thing for us to keep in mind.
Nyla?
I would like to see something done with this area, but at the same time, my mind is telling me that we need to watch our spending, and if this is going to be pursued with TIF funding, I question that. And as most residents who keep track of what's going on with the board, they know that I always question TIF funding, but this would really make me question it, because if it becomes a public space, it would never add to the tax base.
Robert?
Yeah, I share in the concerns about the tax base, since this is in the TID for downtown, that if we pulled $500,000 of assessed value out of the TID, that would probably be not great. I've talked about this before in open session. I still struggle with what we want to do with this. I mean, there's a lot of choices on here, and it still seems that we haven't really decided what the best choice would be yet. So I abstained in the past. I'm still kind of in abstention at this point, because I'm still just don't have enough information to really make a good choice on this. And I do agree, it's not selling that quickly, so I still feel like we have time to think about it.
Aaron?
Yeah, I couldn't find what I was looking up, so comment without, but I guess one thing I'll add, just we have this list of possibilities, so we also could do nothing, so I don't want the public to think, oh, we're for sure doing this. This is such a central part of our downtown, and it's one of those places that, yes, it has all this potential. It's connected to another beloved historic building we own. So it's not like just a random property that we're looking at. I think it's really neat to see how something like this could help further sense of place in our community, and getting people out and engaging with each other is one of the most foundational parts of having a community, a village. So when we can go through avenues like this, I just think that's exciting, and another one of it's like not maybe our most basic function, like fire protection, but a service we can provide the community by having places for them to go and interact with each other. It's weird to see the cultist parking lot across the railroad tracks. And I think it's also it's a cool testament to how our downtown has changed, and also there is other things going on, which I think does down there, and there are businesses and there are events, and downtown is awesome. And So I think it's also adds to the relevance of why this area, they're not just because of the lone girl or that building, but if you look at even just that small, screenshot from over 10 years ago, to see that people are actually engaging in downtown, I think proves that this is a worthy, discussion. So, I don't know if this is Renee or Brian, but could you just give us an overview of maybe like where funding could possibly come from for something like this that might help people who are listening? Like, are there things we couldn't use to fund this, I guess, or so?
Well, I mean, I think the original thought was to use the TIF 8 money or 5. I guess it's probably in 8 now, the overlay. I mean, obviously the board can always borrow funds to purchase things. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. There's no, pot of money that we have sitting around to do something like this.
I'm not trying to advocate one way or the other for you on this decision. Municipalities all the time purchase property. Sometimes they purchase it knowing exactly what they want to do with it. Sometimes they purchase it not knowing. It's always a risk. The village bumped into this risk in about 2003 and 2004. It purchased a number of properties downtown, and then the economy went upside down in 2007 and 2008. And ultimately, it worked out okay for the village because I think the village was able to utilize, from a TIF perspective, money was used from a TIF, I think, to buy those properties. The village wasn't able to sell those properties as quickly as it had hoped. And then, obviously that, to Nyla's point, that in Robert's point, that creates an issue. But I think we were able to borrow some money from another TIF district to ultimately make it work. But that, I would, without advocating one way or the other, I do think you want to keep in mind what happened in the 2000s.
I think can I just add to the question about the funding request? The reason I would put out there the TIF as its use is because the project plan that the village had approved for the downtown dovetails straight towards a potential purchase such as this in several of the use categories here. What I will put out there for the board to consider is whether you want staff to take any additional action at this point. For example, if you want a professional appraisal completed on the property that could give you a more accurate idea as to its value, that would then inform you on an offer that you may wish to make at some point, that could be a potential direction that you give staff, is to take steps to get an appraisal done. The other thing that we could do is look carefully. Several of you brought up the issue of fire suppression requirements. I can't sit here and tell you what is or isn't required. It's probably going to be dependent on the use. And that's a question that we could probably pose to our building inspection department and get a good answer for you. So those are things you could direct staff to do if you wish.
All right, Robert.
I think something that would help, and this kind of touches on what Sam was talking about, if we had a strategic plan or objective that we did want to become acquirers of properties, I think that would make it more, at least from my perspective, justifiable to vote for something like this. I still maintain that it's, while I understand that we're acting because it's available and we weren't planning on it being available, it's generally not, since the early 2000s, not really been a policy of the village to acquire land to do it. So, I mean, I could say something conditional, like as long as we're going to make sure that the comp plan starts addressing, the village's stance on acquiring property for future redevelopment, I could see something like that if we could make it contingent. But it just feels too much like we might be holding on to something that ends up being a bit of a, I don't want to say a money pit, but I mean, if we are talking about like fire suppression and things like that, like it starts getting more money. And while we could borrow from other TID districts, I still think that that's not necessarily, I think, what many people in here would like to see. So
Yeah, go ahead, Tricia.
So to add on to that, one of the reasons that we started having this conversation is to not miss an opportunity instead of just letting something, whether it sit or, have it, go into hands where nothing is done to it, no investment is made. There's nothing that if there is a private party interested in doing something cool or creative with this space, whether it's a renovation or a, rejuvenation of just the way it's laid out, that individual couldn't come and request support or assistance of some form without us having to be involved on the buyer side.
Much is the way for Grace Coffee.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we helped out with that. Yeah, I hear you, Robert. We do talk every once in a while about vision and what the community could and should look like and policies that would kind of help provide some guidance is maybe something that in addition to the comp plan, we could be thinking about. I would be interested in seeing, I don't know if anybody else is, in having the building inspector go through to just learn a little bit more about the building if we were to contemplate it. I'm not sure how much would a professional appraisal cost. I would imagine.
The $3,000 to $4,000 is what we've experienced
Okay.
in other appraisals for projects here.
Okay.
Is that what
I
you're
think
hearing?
that's fair. And when it comes to the building inspector, we're gonna have to have permission
Okay.
to get on there.
To go through. All right. I would be in favor of seeking at least the building inspector to go through and maybe we can contemplate at the next meeting whether or not, based on that, we would want to get a professional appraisal of the property.
I think that would be fine. Have we looked into any, applying for any grants related to this property? Because the thing is, this is going to be more than just, the $500,000. Obviously, any sort of fire suppression, if you want to put a sprinkler system in this, you're probably talking minimum $300,000. It clearly needs a new roof on much of the building. You've got demolition costs, painting. I mean, you're getting up into easily into the mid 1 millions at that point.
So grant wise, it's been a bit of a dicey couple of weeks. So am I understating that enough? But I'm wondering if there are some grants that, Lauren, could you maybe pull some grant opportunities for us to talk about the next time if there are any, if there's anything left, like what would this
I
look
can
like?
take a look to see if there's anything available.
Mhm.
We haven't really gone down that road, not knowing what direction the board wanted to go in. But based on this conversation, I can take a look and try to have an answer by the next meeting.
Likely WDC's community development grant, but I don't know because I think there's another small grant for this property or similar. So I don't know if you can double up on it. Maybe even historic tax credit grant.
We did the Vibrant Spaces grant
Yeah.
for the depot, and so I'm not sure
Yeah, I don't know that either, if it can.
if you can apply
Piggyback.
again for another similar space or not.
Yeah, if we could just get a, kind of a general, what's the condition of the building? What would it look like to purchase it? What would, just an inkling of what we might be in. I think that might be helpful. Yeah. As for me, I love a good renovation. So I do. So I see the possibilities here, but I think that the points that everyone has made about being careful and how do we pay for it and is this purposeful are all really good points. So I'll get in there with a sledgehammer and take down the sheetrock myself. So, all right. Any other comments on this or anything else? Nope. All right. Thank you. That is item 3 out of 3.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all for coming tonight and thanks for those of you that tuned in.